They said she'd crack under pressure, that when the moment came, she'd freeze like every woman before her. What they didn't expect was that when a $2 billion B-2 Spirit bomber lost all its systems at 30,000 feet, Captain Zara Nakamura would become the only thing standing between 12 crew members and certain death, threading a 172-foot stealth aircraft through power lines onto a Montana highway with the precision of a surgeon and the nerves of a glacier. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Zara Nakamura had mastered the art of invisible defiance. Every morning at 0500 hours, she'd arrive at Malmstrom Air Force Base's operations center, grab her flight gear, and prepare for another day of proving herself to men who'd already decided she didn't belong. At 29, Zara possessed more flight hours in complex aircraft than most pilots accumulated in a decade. But in the exclusive world of B-2 Spirit operations, statistics seem to carry less weight than assumptions. The 341st Operations Group's Thunder Squadron was the Air Force's most elite stealth bomber unit, tasked with flying the most expensive aircraft ever built. Each B-2 cost more than most countries' annual defense budgets, and the pilots selected to fly them were supposed to represent the absolute pinnacle of military aviation. Zara had fought tooth and nail to earn her place among the 24 pilots qualified to operate these ghost-like machines, but earning respect was proving far more challenging than earning her wings. Colonel Vincent Caldwell commanded Thunder Squadron with the iron discipline of a man who'd spent 30 years climbing the military hierarchy. His office walls displayed commendations from 3 wars, photos with presidents and defense secretaries, and a collection of model aircraft that told the story of American air superiority. What those walls didn't display was any evidence that he'd ever worked with a female pilot, let alone trusted one with a multi-billion-dollar strategic asset. Caldwell wasn't overtly hostile. That would have been too obvious, too actionable. Instead, he practiced the subtle art of professional marginalization. "Nakamura," he'd say during mission briefings, barely glancing in her direction, "you'll be running backup systems analysis today. Keep those technical specs sharp and report any anomalies." While her male counterparts received primary pilot assignments for strategic missions, Zara found herself relegated to support roles, secondary positions, and endless training scenarios that never seemed to lead to real operational responsibility. The squadron's culture reflected Caldwell's leadership philosophy. Captain Garrett Lynch, a cocky pilot from Texas with movie star looks and an ego to match, never missed an opportunity to question Zara's presence. "Hope you brought your reading glasses, Storm. These technical manuals can be pretty complex for someone more used to flying cargo planes." The reference to her previous assignment stung because it revealed how little they knew, or cared to know, about her actual background. Lieutenant Ryan Fletcher was worse in his quiet way. He'd nod politely when Zara offered tactical insights during planning sessions, then immediately present the same suggestions as his own ideas. When she'd point out discrepancies in flight plans or technical specifications, Fletcher would smile condescendingly and explain concepts she'd mastered years before he'd even entered the cockpit of a military aircraft. But it was Captain Andre Baptiste who delivered the most cutting remarks with surgical precision. Baptiste had been passed over for promotion twice and seemed to blame everyone except himself for his stagnant career. "Must be nice having diversity quotas," he'd mutter whenever Zara's name appeared on any desirable assignment. "Some of us actually have to prove ourselves the hard way." The comments were always just quiet enough that filing a complaint would seem petty, but loud enough that everyone heard them. The silence that followed Baptiste's remarks was perhaps worse than the comments themselves. Nobody ever told him to back off. Nobody reminded him that Zara had outperformed him in every simulation exercise they'd flown together. The collective silence felt like complicity, creating an atmosphere where discrimination thrived in the shadows of professional courtesy. Zara's refuge was the B-2 itself. Once she was strapped into the pilot seat of the flying wing, surrounded by the most advanced avionic systems ever created, the politics disappeared. The aircraft didn't care about gender or squadron dynamics. It responded to skill, precision, and the kind of intuitive understanding that separated good pilots from exceptional ones. She'd developed an almost mystical connection with the bomber systems, able to sense problems before instruments detected them, and execute maneuvers that pushed the envelope of what the aircraft was designed to do.
Chief Master Sergeant Murphy, the squadron's senior maintenance chief, was one of the few people who recognized Zara's exceptional abilities. That pilot knows every system on the Spirit better than some of the engineers who designed it, he'd tell anyone who'd listen. Treats that aircraft like it's part of her own body. But Murphy was career enlisted personnel who understood the unspoken rules about staying in his lane when it came to officer politics. The breaking point had been building like a thunderstorm, gathering strength over the Montana plains. Zara could feel it in the way conversations stopped when she entered the ready room, in the way her technical suggestions were consistently ignored during mission planning, in the way Caldwell's eyes seemed to look right through her during operational briefings. She'd endured 3 years of systematic exclusion from the squadron's most important missions, watching as less qualified pilots received assignments she'd trained her entire career to fly. 2 weeks before everything changed, Zara had overheard a conversation that crystallized her impossible situation. She'd returned early from a training flight and was walking past Caldwell's office when Lynch's voice carried through the partially open door. "I'm telling you, Colonel, it's a liability waiting to happen. When things go sideways at altitude, she's gonna fold. And then what? We lose a $2 billion aircraft and potentially classified capabilities because someone was trying to make a political statement?" Caldwell's response was measured, professional, devastating. "Captain Lynch, Captain Nakamura has performed adequately in her training assignments." Adequately isn't good enough when you're flying strategic missions over hostile territory, Lynch pressed. "Look, I'm not saying she can't handle routine flights, but there's a difference between flying and fighting. When the pressure's real and lives are on the line, she'll crack. They always do." Fletcher's voice joined the conversation with clinical precision. "Lynch has a point, sir. The psychological profiles are clear about stress responses under extreme conditions. Maybe it's time to consider transferring her to a more suitable position. Transport command, perhaps, or training operations?" The silence that followed felt eternal. Finally, Caldwell spoke with administrative finality. "I'll take your recommendations under advisement, gentlemen. That's all for now." Zara stood frozen in the hallway, her flight bag heavy in her hand, listening to footsteps approach the door. She quickly moved down the corridor, her heart pounding, with a mixture of rage and cold determination. She'd always known this was how they saw her, but hearing it spoken so plainly felt like taking a physical blow to the chest. That night, alone in her base quarters, Zara stared at the framed photograph of her grandfather in his World War II pilot's uniform. Lieutenant Colonel James Nakamura had flown P-51 Mustangs over Europe with the legendary Tuskegee Airmen, fighting 2 wars simultaneously, one against fascism abroad and one against racism at home. His words echoed across the decades. "Excellence isn't optional when the world expects you to fail, granddaughter. You have to be twice as good to get half the recognition, but that just means you become unstoppable." She pulled out her technical manuals and began studying with renewed intensity, focusing on emergency procedures and system failures that most pilots skimmed over. If they wanted to test her under pressure, she'd be ready. If they thought she'd crack when things went wrong, they were about to learn otherwise. The storm was coming to Thunder Squadron, and Zara Nakamura intended to be the one left standing when the turbulence settled. The B-2 Spirit was about to choose its most unlikely guardian. The morning briefing room at Thunder Squadron felt like a courtroom where Zara was perpetually on trial. Every day at 0630 A hours, she'd take her assigned seat in the back row,
always the back row, never invited to join the informal clusters of pilots who gathered near the front, and prepare for another round of professional isolation disguised as standard military procedure. Colonel Caldwell would stride to the podium with his trademark authority, survey the room with eyes that somehow managed to acknowledge every pilot except her, and begin outlining the day's training operations. "Gentlemen," he'd always begin, occasionally catching himself and adding, "and lady," as if her presence was an afterthought that disrupted the natural order of things. The mission assignments followed a depressingly predictable pattern. Lynch would receive primary pilot status for combat simulation exercises. Fletcher would be assigned to strategic reconnaissance missions. Baptiste, despite his mediocre performance evaluations, consistently landed advanced systems training opportunities. And Zara would find herself relegated to what Caldwell diplomatically called technical proficiency exercises, essentially glorified check rides that kept her flying, but never advancing. "Nakamura," Caldwell announced during one typical briefing, "you'll be conducting systems diagnostics on Spirit 847 today. Full technical evaluation, all subsystems. Keep those analytical skills sharp." The assignment was both punishment and protection, keeping her away from anything that mattered while maintaining the pretense that she was a valued member of the squadron. Lynch couldn't resist adding his commentary. "Perfect assignment, Storm. Nothing like quality time with maintenance manuals to really hone those piloting instincts." The scattered laughter that followed felt like doors slamming shut, one after another. What made the discrimination particularly insidious was its professional veneer. Caldwell never said women couldn't fly B-2s. Instead, he consistently assigned Zara to roles that utilized her unique analytical strength and attention to detail. Language that sounded supportive, but effectively sidelined her from operational flying. When she'd request assignment to combat training exercises, he'd explain that her technical expertise was too valuable to risk on routine training missions. The other pilots had learned to follow their commander's lead without question. During tactical planning sessions, Zara would offer insights based on her encyclopedic knowledge of the B-2's capabilities, only to watch her suggestions disappear into a void of polite nods and immediate topic changes. When she'd point out potential problems with flight plans or mission parameters, Lynch or Fletcher would inevitably present revised versions of the same recommendations as their own innovations. The squadron's social dynamics were equally challenging. After duty hours, the pilots would gather at the officers' club for drinks and war stories, but Zara's invitations seemed to get lost in translation. She'd arrive to find empty cables or conversations that mysteriously concluded when she approached. The message was clear. She was tolerated during duty hours, but unwelcome during the informal networking that actually determined career advancement. Chief Master Sergeant Murphy became an unexpected ally during these difficult months. As the squadron's senior maintenance chief, he worked closely with all the pilots, but had developed particular respect for Zara's technical competence. "Captain," he'd say during their aircraft inspections, "most pilots treat these systems like black boxes. You actually understand how they work." His validation meant more than he probably realized, coming from someone whose opinion was based truly on professional competence rather than politics. Murphy occasionally shared insights that revealed the depth of the squadron's dysfunction. "You know, Captain, I've been maintaining these aircraft for 8 years. I've seen a lot of pilots come through the squadron, and I can tell you something. Most of them couldn't troubleshoot a complex systems failure if their lives depended on it. They rely on automated diagnostics and hope for the best." He'd pause meaningfully. "But you think like an engineer and fly like an artist. That's rare." The technical expertise Murphy referenced had become Zara's secret weapon. While other pilots relied heavily on the B-2's sophisticated automated systems, she insisted on understanding every component, every backup procedure, every failure mode that could potentially compromise a mission. She studied technical manuals like scripture, memorized emergency procedures that most pilots skimmed over, and practiced manual flying techniques that the aircraft's advanced computers usually handled automatically. Her dedication bordered on obsession, but it was driven by necessity rather than choice. Every other pilot in the squadron had the luxury of making mistakes and learning from them without career-ending consequences. Zara knew that her first significant error would be her last, evidence that women couldn't handle the pressure of flying strategic aircraft. The margin for error was zero, so she prepared for scenarios that others considered impossible. During one particularly challenging systems diagnostic, Zara discovered a subtle vibration pattern in Spirit 847's port engine that didn't match any known maintenance issues. The automated diagnostic showed everything within normal parameters, but her intuition insisted something was wrong. After 3 hours of detailed analysis, she identified a mounting bracket that was developing microscopic stress fractures, invisible to routine inspections, but potentially catastrophic during high-stress maneuvers. Murphy was amazed by her discovery. "Captain, that bracket wouldn't have failed for another 50 flight hours, but when it did, it would have been spectacular. How did you know to look there?" Zara's explanation about vibration harmonics and structural resonance patterns impressed even the veteran maintenance chief. But more importantly, it prevented a potential accident that could have destroyed a multi-billion-dollar aircraft. Despite this kind of performance, Caldwell's evaluation of her technical diagnostic work was characteristically dismissive. "Adequate attention to detail," he noted in her performance review, "suitable for continued technical support roles." The same analysis that had prevented a catastrophic failure was reduced to bureaucratic language that damned with faint praise. The isolation was taking its toll, but Zara had learned to channel her frustration into preparation. If they wanted to keep her away from operational missions, she'd make sure that when the opportunity finally came, she'd be more prepared than anyone in the squadron. She studied weather patterns around potential target areas, memorized emergency landing procedures for every airfield within a 1,000-mile radius of their operational zone, and practiced formation flying techniques in the simulator until she could execute them blindfolded. Her grandfather's photograph watched over these late-night study sessions, a reminder that excellence under adversity was a family tradition. Lieutenant Colonel James Nakamura had faced similar challenges 70 years earlier, proving that determination and skill could overcome institutional prejudice. His granddaughter was preparing to continue that legacy, one ignored suggestion and dismissed achievement at a time. The squadron's quarterly evaluation was approaching, and with it the possibility of assignment changes. Zara had submitted her request for operational flying status with meticulously documented evidence of her qualifications and performance. Caldwell's response would determine whether she continued fighting from the margins or finally got the chance to prove herself where it mattered most, in the pilot seat of a B-2 Spirit, flying missions that could change the course of history. The storm was building intensity, and Thunder Squadron was about to discover what happened when you underestimated the quiet professional who'd been preparing for this moment her entire career.
The quarterly Mission Assignment Board meeting took place in Thunder Squadron's secure briefing room, where classified operations were planned behind reinforced steel doors and electronic surveillance countermeasures. Zara had been anticipating this moment for months, knowing that operational assignments were typically redistributed based on performance evaluations and training completions. She'd exceeded every benchmark, completed every required certification, and documented her readiness for advanced mission status with mathematical precision. Colonel Caldwell entered the room carrying a thick folder of personnel files and assignment recommendations, his expression revealing nothing about the decisions that would shape careers for the next quarter. Behind him followed Major Isabella Cruz, the squadron's operations officer, whose presence suggested that today's assignments carried more weight than routine training rotations. "Before we begin," Caldwell announced, settling into his chair at the head of the conference table, "I want to emphasize that these assignments reflect operational requirements and pilot readiness assessments. Personal preferences and individual ambitions are secondary to squadron effectiveness and mission success." The preamble felt ominous to Zara, who recognized the careful language that usually preceded disappointing news. She sat with perfect military posture, her notepad ready, her expression professionally neutral despite the anxiety building in her chest. Major Cruz opened her laptop and projected the quarterly training schedule onto the wall-mounted display. We have several high-profile exercises coming up, including joint operations with Strategic Command, NATO interoperability training, and the annual readiness evaluation that will be observed by Pentagon officials. Zara felt her pulse quicken. These were exactly the kind of assignments she'd been working toward. Complex, high-stakes missions that would demonstrate her capabilities to senior leadership and potentially open doors to operational deployment. She'd prepared for months, studying every aspect of these exercises until she could execute them flawlessly. Caldwell took over the briefing with characteristic authority. Primary pilot assignments for the Strategic Command exercise will go to Lynch as Mission Commander, Fletcher as Deputy Commander, and Baptiste as Systems Specialist. The names landed like hammer blows, each one representing another opportunity denied. These assignments require pilots with extensive operational experience and proven performance under pressure. The irony was suffocating. Zara had more flight hours than Baptiste and better technical scores than Fletcher, but she lacked operational experience precisely because she'd been systematically excluded from operational assignments. It was a perfectly circular trap. No experience because no assignments because no experience. NATO interoperability training will be led by Captain Morrison as primary pilot, with Captain Stevens and Lieutenant Walker as support crew. Again, pilots with inferior qualifications receiving premium assignments while Zara remained invisible. The pattern was so consistent it felt scripted. Major Cruz glanced at her notes before delivering what Zara knew would be her assignment. Captain Nakamura will be leading our Technical Systems Evaluation Program, working directly with Northrop Grumman engineers on software optimization and diagnostic protocol development. The assignment sounded impressive to outsiders, but was essentially a research position that would keep her grounded while others accumulated the flight hours and operational experience necessary for career advancement. It was prestigious busy work, important enough to justify, but irrelevant enough to ensure continued marginalization. Lynch couldn't resist adding his commentary. Perfect fit, Storm. Your analytical skills will be invaluable for that kind of detailed technical work, much better than wasting your talents on routine flying missions. The comment was delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a masterpiece of professional condescension disguised as support. "Sir," Zara said, maintaining her composure despite her racing heart, "I'd like to request reconsideration for operational flying assignments. My technical evaluations exceed squadron averages, and my flight hours qualify me for mission commander status on any of these exercises." The room went silent except for the hum of ventilation systems. Caldwell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a tell that Zara had learned to recognize over 3 years of careful observation. He didn't appreciate being questioned in front of other officers, especially when the questioner was someone he'd already decided didn't belong. "Captain Nakamura," Caldwell's voice carried a warning edge, "these assignments are based on comprehensive evaluation of pilot capabilities, operational readiness, and mission requirements. The Technical Systems Evaluation Program is a critical responsibility that requires your specific expertise."
"I understand that, sir," Zara replied carefully, "but I'm requesting clarification on the criteria used for operational assignments. According to Air Force regulations, pilot assignments should be based on qualifications and performance metrics, both of which support my readiness for operational duties." Major Cruz shifted uncomfortably in her seat. As operations officer, she was responsible for objective pilot evaluations, and Zara's documented performance made Caldwell's assignment decisions difficult to justify on purely professional grounds. Fletcher decided to support his commander. "Colonel, with respect, some of us have been flying operational missions for years. Experience matters when lives are on the line and multi-billion-dollar assets are at risk. Technical knowledge is important, but it's not the same as proven performance under actual operational pressure." The argument would have been more convincing if Fletcher's own operational record wasn't mediocre at best. His years of experience consisted mainly of routine training flights and exercises, where mistakes had minimal consequences. But Zara recognized the underlying message. She was being excluded not because of her qualifications, but despite them. Baptiste added his voice to the chorus of exclusion. Plus, the technical systems program is exactly the kind of high-visibility assignment that looks great on performance evaluations. Working directly with defense contractors, contributing to aircraft improvement programs, that's career-building stuff right there. The suggestion that she should be grateful for marginalization was particularly galling, but Zara maintained her professional demeanor. She'd learned that emotional responses were used as evidence of instability, proof that women couldn't handle pressure in male-dominated environments. Colonel Caldwell made his final pronouncement with bureaucratic finality. Captain Nakamura, the assignments are final. Unless you have questions about your specific duties in the technical systems program, we'll move on to other business. The dismissal was complete and professional, leaving no room for further discussion. Zara had been relegated to another support role, while less qualified pilots received the assignments that would advance their careers. The systematic exclusion was so thorough, it felt coordinated, like a carefully orchestrated campaign to ensure she never gained the experience necessary to challenge their assumptions about her capabilities. After the meeting, Zara remained in her seat as the other officers filed out, discussing their upcoming assignments with obvious excitement. Major Cruz approached her desk with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. "Captain," Cruz said quietly, "for what it's worth, your technical evaluations are exceptional. The technical systems program really is important work." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected directions. There was something in Cruz's tone, a suggestion that the technical assignment might offer possibilities that Zara couldn't immediately see. But at that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of another professional disappointment, Zara could only focus on the pattern of exclusion that seemed destined to define her entire career. That evening, she found herself once again staring at her grandfather's photograph, wondering if his battles had been any more frustrating than her own. The difference was that Lieutenant Colonel James Nakamura had faced his discrimination openly, with clearly defined enemies and obvious injustices to fight against. Zara's battle was more subtle, fought with performance evaluations and assignment justifications that sounded reasonable but felt like slow-motion career assassination. She opened her laptop and began researching the technical systems program with characteristic thoroughness. If she was going to be trapped in another support role, she'd make sure her work was so exceptional that it became impossible to ignore. Excellence was her only weapon against systematic exclusion, and she intended to wield it with surgical precision. The pattern was clear, but patterns could be broken. And sometimes, the person relegated to watching everything had the best view of what was really happening.
The technical systems evaluation program turned out to be more revealing than Zara had anticipated. Working directly with Northrop Grumman's engineering team gave her access to classified performance data, maintenance records, and operational reports from B-2 missions worldwide. What she discovered in those files painted a disturbing picture of Thunder Squadron's actual capabilities versus their perceived expertise. 3 weeks into her assignment, while analyzing flight performance data from recent training exercises, Zara uncovered a pattern that made her blood run cold. Lynch's much-praised operational missions showed consistent navigation errors that had been covered up in official reports. Fletcher's exceptional systems management during NATO exercises had actually resulted in multiple near misses that were attributed to equipment malfunctions rather than pilot error. Most shocking of all, Baptiste's strategic reconnaissance missions contained fundamental tactical mistakes that had compromised classified objectives. The squadron's Golden Boys weren't just underperforming, they were actively endangering missions and covering their mistakes through creative report writing and mutual protection. Meanwhile, Zara's technical diagnostics work had prevented 3 separate aircraft failures, identified 2 critical software vulnerabilities, and improved system reliability across the entire fleet. Yet none of this appeared in her official evaluations. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead Northrop Grumman engineer assigned to work with Zara, had been quietly documenting these discrepancies. "Captain," she said during one of their late-night technical reviews, "I've been working with Air Force pilots for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone with your combination of technical understanding and operational intuition. Your recommendations have prevented more system failures in 3 weeks than most pilots identify in their entire careers." The validation from a civilian expert carried weight that military recognition had failed to provide, but it also highlighted the magnitude of the squadron's dysfunction. Dr. Chen continued with obvious frustration. "What I don't understand is why someone with your capabilities is stuck in a support role while pilots with inferior technical knowledge are flying operational missions." Zara's response was carefully diplomatic. "Military assignments are based on many factors, Doctor. My role here allows me to contribute to aircraft safety and performance optimization." But privately, she was beginning to understand that the discrimination she faced wasn't just about her career. It was actively compromising mission effectiveness and aircraft safety. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when Zara arrived early at the squadron offices to review overnight maintenance reports. She was walking past Colonel Caldwell's office when she heard familiar voices engaged in what sounded like a heated discussion. The door was slightly ajar, and Lynch's voice carried clearly into the hallway. "I'm telling you, Colonel, this technical systems assignment was a mistake. Nakamura's digging into performance data that should stay buried. She's asking questions about mission reports, analyzing flight patterns, and making recommendations that could expose some uncomfortable truths about our operational capabilities." Caldwell's response was measured but clearly concerned. "What kind of questions, Captain?" "She's identified discrepancies in navigation logs, questioned communications protocols during classified missions, and worst of all, she's documented system failures that we've been attributing to equipment malfunctions rather than pilot error. If this information gets to the wrong people, it could trigger investigations that would destroy careers." Fletcher joined the conversation with clinical precision. "The problem is that she's too competent for her own good. Most pilots would accept the official explanations and move on, but she's treating this like a forensic investigation. Her technical analysis is exposing mistakes that were supposed to stay hidden." Zara stood frozen in the hallway, finally understanding the true scope of what she was facing. This wasn't just about gender discrimination. It was about protecting a network of incompetence and cover-ups that had infected the squadron's operational integrity. Her technical expertise hadn't just revealed system problems, it had uncovered a pattern of professional misconduct that threatened the careers of everyone involved. Baptiste's voice added another layer to the conspiracy. "Look, we all know mistakes happen during complex missions. The important thing is maintaining unit cohesion and protecting the squadron's reputation. Zara doesn't understand that some things are better left unreported for the greater good." "The greater good?" Caldwell's tones suggested he was weighing options. "Captain Baptiste, what exactly are you suggesting?"
"Transfer her out before she causes more damage," Baptiste replied without hesitation. "Find a reason. Personality conflicts, better opportunities elsewhere, whatever it takes. Just get her away from operational data before she stumbles onto something that can't be explained away." The silence that followed felt eternal. Zara realized she was holding her breath, waiting for her commanding officer's response to what amounted to a conspiracy to cover up professional misconduct and destroy her career to protect guilty parties. Finally, Caldwell spoke with administrative finality. "I'll review Captain Nakamura's assignment status and consider all available options. In the meantime, I want you to monitor her activities closely. If she's asking questions that could compromise squadron operations, I need to know immediately." Lynch's response carried satisfaction. "Already on it, sir. We've been tracking her research activities and documenting any concerning behavior patterns. When you're ready to move forward with reassignment, we'll have plenty of justification." Fletcher added the final piece of their plan. Plus, her personality profile shows difficulty accepting authority and integrating with squadron culture. Classic indicators of someone who doesn't belong in a high-performance unit like Thunder Squadron. As pieces of a larger puzzle clicked into place, Zara realized the systematic exclusion she'd experienced wasn't just discrimination. It was protection. They'd kept her away from operational missions not because she was incompetent, but because her competence would expose their incompetence. Her technical skills threatened not just their egos, but their careers, and potentially their freedom if their mistakes had compromised national security. As footsteps approached the door, Zara quickly moved down the hallway, her mind racing with implications. She'd finally understood why her exceptional performance had been consistently minimized and marginalized. Excellence was dangerous in an environment built on mediocrity and mutual protection. That evening, alone in her quarters, Zara made copies of every technical report, performance analysis, and safety recommendation she'd generated during her assignment with the Systems Evaluation Program. If they were planning to destroy her career to protect their secrets, she'd make sure those secrets were preserved and properly documented. Her grandfather's photograph seemed to watch with approval as she organized evidence that could change everything. Lieutenant Colonel James Nakamura had fought against systemic injustice with the only weapons available to him: courage and competence. His granddaughter was about to continue that tradition, armed with technical expertise and documented proof of the corruption that had defined her military experience. Dr. Chen had been right. Zara possessed a rare combination of technical understanding and operational intuition. What she hadn't realized was that those same qualities that made her an exceptional pilot also made her a threat to people who'd built their careers on covering up their failures. The storm was no longer building. It had arrived. And Captain Zara Nakamura was about to discover that sometimes the person they try to silence has the loudest voice of all.
The emergency briefing notification arrived at 0347 hours on a frigid Montana morning, jolting Zara from uneasy sleep with its urgent classification. Flash override. All Thunder Squadron personnel report immediately. The timing and priority level suggested something far more serious than routine training exercises or administrative announcements. Within 30 minutes, the entire squadron had assembled in the secure briefing room, their faces reflecting a mixture of anticipation and concern. Colonel Caldwell entered with Major Cruz and two officers Zara didn't recognize: a stern-faced woman with Pentagon credentials and a man whose bearing suggested special operations background. The presence of outside authority immediately elevated the tension in the room, signaling that whatever was about to unfold carried implications far beyond normal squadron operations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Caldwell began, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished by the gravity of the situation. "We've received tasking for an immediate operational deployment. This mission carries the highest national security classification and requires our most experienced and capable pilots." The briefing screen illuminated with a map of Eastern Europe, marked with restricted airspace corridors and strategic waypoints that suggested a penetration mission deep into potentially hostile territory. Zara felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the tactical signatures of exactly the kind of high-stakes operation she'd been preparing for her entire career. Major Cruz took over the technical briefing with unusual intensity. "Intelligence indicates that a classified reconnaissance asset has been compromised in a denied area. Standard recovery operations are impossible due to surface-to-air missile coverage and hostile air patrols. The B-2's stealth capabilities make it the only platform capable of penetrating the area undetected and completing the extraction." The Pentagon liaison, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, stepped forward with additional context. "This mission is time-critical. Every hour of delay increases the risk of intelligence compromise and potential loss of American personnel. We need a crew that can execute flawlessly under extreme pressure, with zero margin for error." Zara's training and experience made her uniquely qualified for exactly this type of mission: complex navigation through hostile airspace, technical system management under stress, and the kind of precision flying that could mean the difference between mission success and international incident. She'd studied similar scenarios extensively, analyzing every variable and contingency until she could execute them blindfolded. Caldwell began announcing crew assignments with his characteristic authority, but Zara detected something different in his demeanor, a reluctance that suggested the decisions weren't entirely his own. Primary mission commander will be Captain Lynch, with Lieutenant Fletcher as systems specialist, and Captain Baptist as navigator. The assignments felt predictable and disappointing, following the same pattern of exclusion that had defined Zara's experience with Thunder Squadron. Despite her superior qualifications and technical expertise, she was once again being sidelined, while less capable pilots received career-defining opportunities. But Colonel Mitchell interrupted Caldwell's announcement with unmistakable authority. "Colonel, I need to review the complete pilot roster and qualifications before finalizing crew assignments. This mission requires specific technical expertise that may not align with standard operational hierarchies." The tension in the room shifted dramatically as Mitchell pulled out a tablet and began reviewing personnel files with obvious knowledge of their contents. Her questions were precise and revealing, cutting through squadron politics to focus on actual capabilities and performance metrics. "Captain Nakamura," Mitchell said, looking directly at Zara with obvious interest, "your technical systems evaluation reports have been forwarded to Strategic Command. Your analysis of B-2 performance optimization and failure mode identification is exactly the expertise we need for this mission." Caldwell's jaw tightened visibly as his carefully maintained narrative about Zara's limited capabilities encountered external validation from the highest levels of Air Force Command. Lynch and Fletcher exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing that their protected positions were being challenged by outside authority. Mitchell continued with clinical precision. "According to your evaluations, Captain Nakamura has identified and prevented more system failures in the past month than most pilots encounter in their entire careers. Her technical understanding of B-2 capabilities exceeds that of pilots with twice her operational experience." The Special Operations Officer, Colonel James Harrison, added his assessment with obvious appreciation for competence. "Ma'am, I've reviewed Captain Nakamura's emergency procedure certifications and technical recommendations. Her preparation for complex failure scenarios is exceptional. For a mission of this sensitivity, that kind of thoroughness could be the difference between success and disaster." Zara felt the room's dynamics shifting around her as external authority challenged the squadron's internal power structure. Years of systematic exclusion were being overruled by people who cared more about mission success than protecting fragile egos and hidden incompetence. "Colonel Caldwell," Mitchell said with unmistakable command authority, "I'm designating Captain Nakamura as primary systems specialist for this mission. Her technical expertise and preparation make her uniquely qualified for the challenges we're likely to encounter." The announcement hit the room like a thunderbolt. Lynch's face went through several shades of red as he realized his assumed mission command was being restructured. Fletcher looked like he'd been physically struck, his usual confidence evaporating as his technical limitations were exposed by comparison. Baptiste simply stared in disbelief that the pilot they'd spent years marginalizing was being elevated by Pentagon-level authority. Caldwell attempted to maintain some control over the situation. "Colonel Mitchell, Captain Nakamura lacks operational experience with this type of high-stakes mission. Perhaps a more experienced pilot would be appropriate for such critical—" "Colonel," Mitchell interrupted with icy professionalism, "Captain Nakamura's technical analysis prevented 3 aircraft failures last month and identified system vulnerabilities that could have compromised multiple missions. That's exactly the kind of operational impact we need for this assignment." Harrison added his support with tactical clarity. "Sir, this mission will likely encounter system challenges and technical problems that require immediate, accurate diagnosis and solution. Captain Nakamura's documented expertise in those areas makes her indispensable for mission success." Major Cruz, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke with obvious relief. "Colonel Mitchell, I can confirm that Captain Nakamura's technical evaluations and system knowledge exceed squadron standards. Her assignment to this mission is fully justified by performance metrics." The validation felt surreal after years of having her capabilities dismissed and minimized. External authority was not only recognizing her expertise, but specifically requesting it for the most important mission Thunder Squadron had received in years. The systematic exclusion that had defined her career was being overruled by people who cared about results rather than politics.
Effective immediately, Mitchell announced with finality. Captain Nakamura will begin mission-specific preparation and briefings. Launch is scheduled for 1800 hours tomorrow, pending final intelligence updates and weather clearance. As the briefing concluded and personnel filed out for mission preparation, Zara remained seated, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The opportunity she'd been fighting for had finally arrived, not through squadron politics or career maneuvering, but through external recognition of the expertise she'd been developing in the shadows. Lynch approached her with barely controlled hostility. "Congratulations, Storm. Try not to get everyone killed when the pressure gets real." The comment revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of what had just happened. This wasn't about politics or quotas, but about competence and preparation under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Zara met his gaze with quiet confidence. "Captain Lynch, I've been preparing for this mission my entire career. The only question is whether you're ready to follow orders from someone you spent years trying to exclude." The tables had turned completely. The pilot they dismissed as technically competent but operationally unsuitable was now leading the most critical mission in the squadron's recent history. And she intended to prove that excellence speaks louder than prejudice, especially when national security hangs in the balance.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The mission briefing at 1600 hours revealed the full scope of what Thunder Squadron was about to attempt. The secure conference room hummed with tension as Colonel Mitchell presented satellite imagery, intelligence reports, and tactical parameters for what could only be described as one of the most dangerous operations in modern Air Force history. The asset we're extracting is a downed reconnaissance drone carrying classified technology that cannot fall into hostile hands, Mitchell explained, pointing to a location deep within denied airspace. Standard recovery operations are impossible due to integrated air defense systems and hostile air patrols. The B-2's stealth capabilities provide our only viable option for penetrating the area undetected. Zara studied the mission parameters with the analytical intensity that had made her invaluable to the technical systems program. The target area was surrounded by overlapping surface-to-air missile coverage, early warning radar systems, and fighter patrols that would make even stealth penetration extremely challenging. Success would require perfect execution of low-level flight profiles, precise navigation through radar gaps, and flawless systems management under combat stress. Captain Lynch, designated as mission commander despite his documented navigation errors, attempted to assert authority over mission planning. "The approach vector should follow standard penetration protocols," he announced, pointing to a flight path that Zara immediately recognized as suboptimal and potentially catastrophic. "Captain Lynch," Zara said carefully, pulling up her technical analysis on the briefing display, "that approach vector takes us directly through a radar coverage gap that only exists for 90-second windows. If our timing is off by even 30 seconds, we'll be detected and targeted by multiple SAM sites." Lynch's face reddened at being corrected in front of Pentagon officials, but his response revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of the tactical situation. "Captain Nakamura, I've flown operational missions for 3 years. I think I understand penetration profiles better than someone who's been stuck in technical support." Colonel Harrison, the Special Operations Liaison, studied Zara's analysis with obvious expertise. "Captain Nakamura, show me your recommended approach vector." His tone carried the authority of someone who'd planned similar operations and understood the life-or-death importance of tactical precision. Zara's alternative approach was mathematically elegant and tactically superior, utilizing terrain masking and electromagnetic dead zones to minimize detection probability while maximizing operational flexibility. Her route planning incorporated weather patterns, enemy patrol schedules, and system performance parameters that Lynch's conventional approach had completely ignored. "Outstanding analysis," Harrison said after reviewing her recommendations. "This approach vector reduces detection probability by 60% and provides multiple abort options if conditions change." He looked directly at Lynch with obvious disapproval. "Captain, I strongly recommend adopting Captain Nakamura's flight path for this mission." The mission launch at 1800 hours proceeded with the kind of precision that defined elite military operations. Zara settled into the system specialist position of the B-2 Spirit, surrounded by displays and controls that felt like extensions of her own nervous system. Months of technical analysis and emergency procedure study had prepared her for exactly this moment.
flying a multi-billion-dollar strategic asset through the most dangerous airspace on Earth. Captain Lynch occupied the mission commander seat with obvious tension, his usual confidence undermined by the external validation of Zara's superior planning and preparation. Lieutenant Fletcher managed communications and navigation with mechanical precision, but his earlier technical mistakes during NATO exercises had destroyed any illusion of competence under pressure. The first 3 hours of flight proceeded normally as the B-2 crossed friendly airspace toward the penetration point. Zara monitored system performance with the analytical intensity that had prevented multiple aircraft failures during her technical assignment, identifying minor anomalies before they could develop into serious problems. At 21:47 hours, approaching the edge of hostile territory, the situation began to deteriorate with terrifying speed. Fletcher's navigation calculations, which had seemed adequate during mission planning, started showing discrepancies that threatened to compromise the entire operation. "Storm, I'm showing drift in our GPS coordinates," Fletcher reported with barely controlled panic. "The waypoints aren't matching the planned route, and I can't isolate the source of the error." Zara's analysis of the navigation anomaly was immediate and definitive. "The GPS signals are being jammed by ground-based electronic warfare systems. We need to switch to inertial navigation and dead reckoning using terrain reference points." Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd anticipated and prepared for exactly this scenario.
Lynch's response revealed the depth of his technical limitations. Inertial navigation at low level through mountainous terrain? That's too risky. We should abort commission and return to base. Negative, Zara replied firmly, her fingers dancing across system controls with practiced efficiency. "I can maintain navigation accuracy using terrain contour matching and electromagnetic signature analysis. The mission parameters are still within acceptable risk thresholds." Colonel Harrison's voice crackled over the secure communication channel from command headquarters. "Thunder 1, what's your status? We're showing navigation anomalies on your position reports." Fletcher's response carried genuine fear. "Command, we're experiencing system failures and navigation problems. Recommend abort and return to friendly airspace." But Zara was already implementing solutions that her months of technical preparation had made possible. She'd studied every terrain feature, electromagnetic signature, and navigation landmark within their operational area until she could fly the route blindfolded using backup systems that most pilots barely understood. "Command, this is Thunder 1 Systems," Zara transmitted with professional confidence. "Navigation jamming is manageable using alternative positioning methods. Mission can proceed as planned with modified flight profile." Harrison's relief was audible over the radio. "Understood, Thunder 1. Proceed with mission execution under systems specialist guidance." The role reversal was complete and undeniable. Lynch, the supposed mission commander with years of operational experience, was paralyzed by technical challenges that Zara solved with methodical expertise. Fletcher's navigation failures were being compensated by her superior understanding of backup systems and emergency procedures. At 2:20:03 hours, the crisis escalated beyond navigation problems. Warning lights illuminated across the B-2's instrument panel as multiple systems began reporting anomalies that threatened the aircraft's stealth capabilities and flight safety. "We have engine parameter fluctuations, hydraulic pressure warnings, and electrical system anomalies," Fletcher reported with rising panic. "This is beyond normal operational parameters. We need to abort immediately." Lynch's command authority collapsed completely under the pressure of cascading system failures. "I can't manage all these problems simultaneously. The aircraft is becoming uncontrollable." But Zara had been preparing for exactly this scenario during her months of technical systems analysis. Her understanding of B-2 failure modes and emergency procedures exceeded that of most test pilots, and her analytical mind was perfectly suited to managing multiple critical problems under extreme pressure. "I have the aircraft," she announced, with calm authority, taking control of a situation that was rapidly spinning beyond the capabilities of her supposed superiors. The moment that Caldwell, Lynch, and the entire squadron had predicted, when she would crack under pressure and prove their assumptions about female pilots, had arrived. Instead of freezing or panicking, Zara Nakamura was about to demonstrate that her years of preparation and technical expertise made her the most qualified person in Thunder Squadron to handle the crisis that was about to test everyone's limits. The real mission was just beginning, and the pilot they'd tried to silence was about to save them all. What happened next would be discussed in Air Force academies for decades to come. analyzed by aviation experts and remembered as one of the most extraordinary displays of piloting skill under impossible circumstances. At 2234 hours, flying at 28,000 feet through hostile airspace with multiple system failures cascading through the B-2's complex electronics, Captain Zara Nakamura faced the kind of emergency that existed only in worst-case scenario training manuals. The first catastrophic failure struck without warning. A massive electrical surge, caused by enemy electromagnetic pulse weapons that intelligence had failed to detect, fried the primary flight control computers and backup navigation systems simultaneously. The $2.1 billion aircraft, designed to be nearly impossible to fly manually, suddenly became a 172-foot flying wing that responded to pilot inputs with the sluggishness of a wounded whale. "Jesus Christ," Fletcher breathed, watching his instrument panel go dark section by section. "We've lost primary flight controls, navigation, communication, and weapon systems. This is a complete electrical failure." Lynch, the mission commander who had spent years questioning Zara's competence under pressure, proved spectacularly incapable of handling actual pressure. His hands shook on the controls as he struggled to understand what was happening to his aircraft. "I can't control the aircraft. The flight surfaces aren't responding properly. We're losing altitude, and I can't stop it." The B-2 Spirit, without its sophisticated computer assistance, required a level of manual flying skill that few pilots possessed. The aircraft's unique flying wing design made it aerodynamically unstable, dependent on constant computer corrections to maintain controlled flight. Flying it manually was like trying to balance on a knife edge while blindfolded. Theoretically possible, but practically beyond the capabilities of most human pilots. "I'm taking the aircraft," Zara announced, her voice cutting through the chaos with absolute authority. Her hands moved to the controls with the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours studying exactly this scenario, preparing for the moment when theoretical knowledge would become the difference between survival and disaster. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled over their emergency frequency, barely audible through the electromagnetic interference. "Thunder One, what's your plan? We're tracking multiple hostile aircraft converging on your position." Zara's response was delivered with the calm confidence of someone who had found their moment of destiny. "Command, I'm executing emergency highway landing on Highway 447, approximately 30 miles southwest of current position. Transmitting coordinates now for recovery team positioning." The idea of landing a B-2 Spirit on a highway was beyond unprecedented. It was considered impossible by every aviation expert who had ever studied the aircraft's capabilities. The margins for error were essentially zero. Too fast, and the aircraft would overshoot the runway and crash into mountainous terrain. Too slow, and it would stall and crash short of the highway. The approach had to be perfect, executed manually without computer assistance, through damaged flight controls, at night, in hostile territory.
Lynch made one final attempt to assert his authority as mission commander. "Nakamura, this is insane. No one has ever landed a B-2 on a highway. You're going to kill us all." Zara's response would be remembered by everyone who heard it. "Captain Lynch, I've spent 3 years preparing for scenarios that everyone else considered impossible. You wanted to know if I'd crack under pressure. Watch me prove that preparation beats panic every single time." Her approach to the highway landing was a masterpiece of aviation skill and tactical thinking. She used terrain masking to avoid enemy radar while descending, managed power settings to maintain optimal glide path with failing engines, and compensated for damaged flight controls using techniques that most pilots had never even heard of, let alone mastered. At 500 feet above ground level, threading between power lines that could destroy the aircraft instantly, Zara's voice remained steady as granite. "Flaps to landing position. Gear down. Power at minimum sustainable thrust. We're committed to landing. Everyone prepare for hard contact." Fletcher was openly weeping with terror. Lynch had curled into a protective position, completely overwhelmed by the situation. But Zara flew with the precision of a surgeon and the nerves of a test pilot. Her hands steady on controls that barely responded, her mind calculating wind corrections and approach angles with mathematical precision. The B-2 Spirit touched down on Highway 447 at 22:47 hours with a precision that defied belief. The massive aircraft, designed for supersonic flight at extreme altitude, settled onto cracked asphalt with barely a bounce, rolled out perfectly between the highway's guardrails, and came to a controlled stop just short of a bridge that would have destroyed them all. In the sudden silence that followed, broken only by cooling metal and Fletcher's sobbing, Lynch's voice was barely audible. "How did you... That's impossible. No one could have..." Zara's response was delivered with quiet satisfaction earned through years of preparation and moments of execution. "Captain Lynch, that's what happens when you actually study the aircraft instead of just flying it. Excellence isn't luck, it's preparation meeting opportunity." She had done the impossible. Not only had she saved 3 lives and preserved a multi-billion-dollar strategic asset, she had executed one of the most extraordinary emergency landings in aviation history. The pilot they had dismissed as technically competent but operationally limited had just proven that she was the most skilled aviator any of them had ever known. The highway landing would make history, but more importantly, it would finally silence everyone who had ever questioned whether Captain Zara Nakamura belonged in the cockpit of America's most advanced aircraft.
The immediate aftermath of the highway landing unfolded with the controlled chaos of a major military operation. Within 45 minutes of Zara's impossible touchdown on Highway 447, the remote stretch of asphalt was swarming with recovery vehicles, security teams, and technical specialists who had been scrambled from 3 different Air Force bases. The sight of a $2.1 billion B-2 Spirit bomber sitting intact on a Montana highway would have been surreal under any circumstances. But the precision of the landing made it look almost intentional. Colonel Harrison arrived with the first wave of recovery personnel, his special operations background evident in how quickly he assessed and secured the situation. His first priority was crew debriefing, but his initial questions revealed that he already understood the magnitude of what had occurred. "Captain Nakamura," he said, approaching the aircraft where Zara was completing post-flight systems shutdown, "I need you to walk me through exactly how you executed that landing. What you accomplished should have been impossible." Zara's response was characteristically methodical and precise. "Sir, the approach required manual flight control compensation for approximately 37 separate system failures, terrain masking to avoid enemy radar detection, and power management using only backup hydraulic systems. Landing parameters were calculated using visual references and dead reckoning navigation." Her technical explanation made it sound routine, but Harrison's expression revealed his understanding of the extraordinary skill required. Fletcher, still shaken from the experience, provided additional context that highlighted the crew dynamics during the crisis. "Colonel, Captain Nakamura took control when both Captain Lynch and I were overwhelmed by the system failures. Her knowledge of emergency procedures and manual flight capabilities saved the aircraft and crew." The admission from Fletcher was significant because it came from someone who had spent years questioning Zara's competence and suitability for operational missions. His public acknowledgement that she had performed beyond his own capabilities represented a fundamental shift in how the squadron would be forced to evaluate her contributions. Lynch's debriefing was more complex and revealing. When Harrison questioned his decision-making during the crisis, Lynch's responses exposed the depth of his technical limitations and the extent to which squadron politics had elevated incompetent personnel to critical positions. "I've never encountered system failures of that magnitude," Lynch admitted. "The manual flight control requirements were beyond my training and experience." Harrison's follow-up questions were pointed and professional. "Captain Lynch, according to mission records, Captain Nakamura recommended alternative approach vectors that would have avoided the electromagnetic pulse weapons that caused your system failures. Why weren't her recommendations implemented?"
The question hung in the air, like an indictment, exposing the fundamental problem that had nearly resulted in disaster. Lynch's operational experience, which had been used to justify his mission command status, had proven inadequate when confronted with the kind of technical challenges that Zara navigated routinely. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Northrop Grumman engineer who had worked with Zara during her technical systems assignment, arrived with the aircraft recovery team and immediately began documenting the damage assessment. Her findings were both alarming and vindicated Zara's emergency procedures. The electromagnetic pulse damage should have made controlled flight impossible, Dr. Chen reported to Harrison. The fact that Zara maintained aircraft control and executed a precision landing represents piloting skill at the highest levels of aviation expertise. The technical analysis revealed something even more significant. Zara's months of systems evaluation work had prepared her for exactly the type of failures they had encountered. Her understanding of backup procedures, manual flight control techniques, and emergency systems management literally saved the mission and potentially prevented an international incident. Colonel Mitchell arrived from the Pentagon with a team of investigators and senior Air Force officials whose presence signaled this incident would have far-reaching implications for Thunder Squadron and military aviation policy. Her first action was to order a comprehensive review of crew assignments, training standards, and the decision-making process that had nearly resulted in disaster. "Captain Nakamura," Mitchell said during her initial assessment, "your emergency landing will be studied at every level of Air Force leadership. But more importantly, your performance raises serious questions about how pilot assignments are made and how technical expertise is evaluated in operational units." The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. Mitchell's team reviewed mission planning records, training evaluations, and the decision-making process that had placed Lynch in command despite his documented technical limitations. The contrast between official evaluations and actual performance under pressure was stark and undeniable.
Major Cruz, Thunder Squadron's operations officer, found herself in the uncomfortable position of explaining assignment decisions that looked increasingly indefensible. Captain Nakamura's technical evaluations have consistently exceeded squadron standards, she admitted during questioning. Her assignment to support roles was based on operational experience requirements rather than capability assessments. But Mitchell's investigation revealed that operational experience had become a convenient justification for excluding qualified personnel while protecting less capable pilots who fit the squadron's cultural preferences. The circular logic that had trapped Zara, no operational assignments because of limited experience because of no operational assignments, was exposed as systematic discrimination disguised as professional judgment. The breakthrough came when Mitchell's team discovered the documented evidence that Zara had been collecting during her technical systems assignment. Her files contained detailed analyses of squadron performance, safety recommendations that had been ignored, and technical evaluations that contradicted official personnel assessments. Most damaging was the evidence of the conspiracy to transfer her out of the squadron to protect other pilots' reputations. The recorded conversations and documented performance discrepancies painted a picture of institutional dysfunction that threatened mission effectiveness and aircraft safety. Harrison's report to Air Force leadership was unambiguous in its conclusions. Captain Nakamura's performance during this crisis demonstrates exceptional piloting skill, technical expertise, and decision-making ability under extreme pressure. Her capabilities clearly exceed those of personnel currently assigned to operational leadership positions. The reversal was complete and undeniable. The pilot who had been systematically excluded from meaningful assignments had proven herself capable of achievements that her supposed superiors couldn't even comprehend. Her technical expertise, dismissed as unsuitable for operational flying, had been the only thing standing between mission success and catastrophic failure. Within 72 hours,
word of the highway landing had reached the highest levels of Pentagon leadership. General Patricia Rodriguez, the Air Force Chief of Staff, personally reviewed the incident reports and ordered a comprehensive investigation of Thunder Squadron's leadership and assignment practices. The pilot they had tried to silence had become the most talked about aviator in the Air Force, and her extraordinary performance was about to trigger changes that would reshape military aviation for generations to come. Excellence, it turned out, was impossible to hide when the stakes were high enough and the performance was extraordinary enough to demand recognition.
The formal hearing convened 2 weeks later in a secure conference room at Air Force headquarters in Washington, D.C., where the most significant military discrimination case in decades would reshape policies throughout the service. Zara sat at a polished mahogany table, flanked by military attorneys and advocacy representatives, facing a panel of senior officers whose decisions would determine not just her career, but the future of gender equality in military aviation. General Patricia Rodriguez presided over the proceedings with the authority of someone who had fought similar battles throughout her own career. Beside her sat Colonel Vincent Ashford from the Inspector General's office and Brigadier General Michael Torres from Air Combat Command, whose collective experience represented the highest levels of Air Force leadership and legal expertise. This hearing is convened to investigate allegations of systematic discrimination and professional retaliation against Captain Zara Nakamura, General Rodriguez announced. The evidence presented will be evaluated not just for its impact on Captain Nakamura's career, but for its implications regarding institutional practices that may have compromised mission effectiveness and aircraft safety. Colonel Caldwell sat across the room with his military defense counsel, looking like a man who had aged years in the span of weeks. The confident squadron commander who had dismissed Zara's capabilities now faced the destruction of his career and reputation based on decisions that had seemed professionally justified, but were being revealed as systematically discriminatory. The first witness was Colonel Harrison, whose special operations background lent credibility to his assessment of pilot performance under extreme conditions. "General Rodriguez," he testified, "Captain Nakamura's emergency landing represents one of the most extraordinary displays of piloting skill I've witnessed in 25 years of military service. Her technical expertise and decision-making ability under pressure exceed those of pilots with twice her operational experience." Harrison's testimony established the baseline of Zara's exceptional capabilities, but his next revelation proved even more damaging to Thunder Squadron's leadership. "During my investigation, I discovered that Captain Nakamura had identified and recommended solutions for multiple safety issues that were ignored by squadron leadership. Her technical analysis prevented at least 3 potential aircraft failures that could have resulted in loss of life and equipment." Dr. Sarah Chen's testimony provided technical validation that was impossible to dispute. Captain Nakamura's understanding of B-2 systems and emergency procedures exceeds that of most KEST pilots and engineering specialists. Her performance during the crisis demonstrated knowledge and skill that saved not only the crew, but preserved a strategic asset worth over $2 billion. But the most devastating testimony came from Lieutenant Fletcher, whose admission of his own limitations and Zara's superior performance destroyed the narrative that had justified her exclusion from operational assignments. "Captain Nakamura took control when I was overwhelmed by system failures that were beyond my training and experience. Her knowledge of manual flight procedures and emergency systems management was the only thing that prevented the loss of aircraft and crew." Fletcher's testimony was particularly damaging because it came from someone who had actively participated in marginalizing Zara's contributions. His public acknowledgement that she had performed beyond his own capabilities represented a fundamental admission that squadron assignments had been based on bias rather than merit. The documentary evidence that Zara had compiled during her technical systems assignment provided the smoking gun that made discrimination undeniable.
Her files contained detailed analyses showing that qualified female pilots were consistently assigned to support roles despite superior performance metrics, while less capable male pilots received operational assignments and advancement opportunities. Most damaging was the recorded evidence of the conspiracy to transfer her out of the squadron to protect other pilots' reputations. The conversations that Caldwell, Lynch, and others had believed were private were now being presented as evidence of institutional corruption and professional misconduct. General Rodriguez addressed Caldwell directly with cold professional authority. "Colonel, the evidence shows that Captain Nakamura consistently outperformed pilots who received operational assignments she was denied. How do you explain assignment decisions that appear to contradict documented performance evaluations?" "General, military assignments are based on multiple factors, including operational experience, unit cohesion, and leadership requirements. Captain Nakamura's technical skills were valuable, but operational flying requires different capabilities."
"Colonel," Rodriguez replied with unmistakable skepticism, "Captain Nakamura's technical skills just prevented the loss of a strategic aircraft and saved 3 lives under circumstances that overwhelmed the pilots you deemed more operationally capable. Your argument appears to be contradicted by actual results under combat conditions." The hearing's climactic moment came when Rodriguez presented the findings of a comprehensive review of Thunder Squadron's assignment practices and performance outcomes. The statistical analysis was damning, showing consistent patterns of discrimination that had elevated less qualified personnel while marginalizing exceptional performers based on gender bias. This panel finds clear and convincing evidence of systematic discrimination against Captain Nakamura based on gender, rather than performance or qualifications, Rodriguez announced. Furthermore, this discrimination appears to have compromised mission effectiveness and aircraft safety by elevating less capable personnel to critical positions. Caldwell's military career effectively ended with Rodriguez's next pronouncement. "Colonel Caldwell, you are hereby relieved of command effective immediately. A letter of reprimand will be placed in your permanent file, and you are barred from any future command assignments pending further administrative action." Lynch and Fletcher faced similar consequences, with professional reprimands and transfer orders that would effectively end their advancement opportunities. Baptiste, whose incompetence had been documented throughout the investigation, was recommended for separation from service. But Rodriguez's most significant announcement concerned Zara's future. "Major Nakamura," she said, using the promotion that had been accelerated as part of the resolution, "you are hereby assigned as Chief of Advanced Flight Operations at the Air Force Test Pilot School. Your technical expertise and proven performance under extreme conditions make you uniquely qualified to train the next generation of military aviators." The assignment was extraordinary, one of the most prestigious positions in military aviation, typically reserved for pilots with decades of operational experience. Zara's promotion represented not just personal vindication, but institutional recognition that excellence transcends traditional career paths and cultural barriers. Rodriguez concluded the hearing with remarks that would be quoted in military leadership courses for years to come. This case demonstrates that institutional biases don't just harm individual careers, they compromise operational effectiveness and threaten mission success. The pilot, who was deemed unsuitable for operational flying, just executed one of the most extraordinary emergency landings in aviation history. As the hearing concluded, Zara felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. She had won completely. Her career was transformed, her capabilities were officially recognized, and the system that had marginalized her was being reformed. But the victory had come at tremendous personal cost and had revealed ugly truths about the organization she had devoted her life to serving. Outside the hearing room, Colonel Harrison approached her with obvious respect and gratitude. "Colonel Nakamura, the Air Force is better for what you've accomplished here. Your fight didn't just save your own career, it's going to protect every qualified aviator who comes after you."
The pilot who was told she didn't belong in the cockpit was now responsible for determining who else deserved to be there. Excellence, it turned out, was not just its own reward, it was the foundation for transforming entire institutions.
2 years later, Major Zara Nakamura stood at the podium of the Air Force Test Pilot School's main auditorium, addressing a class of 43 students whose eager faces represented the future of military aviation. The audience included not just American pilots, but international officers from allied nations who had come to learn from the woman whose highway landing had become legendary throughout the global aviation community. Emergency procedures aren't just about technical knowledge, Zara told her students, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had proven every word under the most extreme circumstances. They're about maintaining clarity when chaos reigns, making decisions when information is incomplete, and executing flawlessly when failure means death. These skills transcend any single aircraft or mission. They define what it means to be an exceptional pilot. In the front row sat Lieutenant Colonel Isabella Cruz, recently promoted and now serving as Director of Advanced Training Programs. Her presence represented one of many institutional changes that had followed Zara's case, as the Air Force actively promoted qualified women to leadership positions that had been systematically denied for decades. After class, Zara walked across the Edwards Air Force Base flight line toward her office, still amazed by how completely her world had transformed. Her assignment as Chief of Advanced Flight Operations had exceeded every expectation, allowing her to develop training programs that emphasized technical expertise, emergency procedures, and the kind of analytical thinking that had saved her life during the highway landing. Her office overlooked the main runway where test pilots pushed the boundaries of what was possible in aviation, a constant reminder that excellence required continuous challenge and growth. On her desk sat 3 items that told the story of her transformation: her original pilot wings from flight school, a commendation letter from General Rodriguez, and a photograph from her first class of advanced flight instructors. 24 officers, 18 of them women. The systematic changes had been swift and comprehensive. The Nakamura protocols, as they had become known informally, established clear metrics for assignment decisions and required documentation for any disparities in career advancement opportunities. More importantly, they created protected channels for reporting discrimination and retaliation, ensuring that future cases could be addressed before they required congressional intervention. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Senior Technical Advisor to the Air Force Chief of Staff, had been instrumental in implementing technical competency standards that prioritized actual performance over subjective evaluations. Zara's case proved that technical expertise isn't just academic knowledge, it's operational capability that can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, she had told a recent conference of military engineers. The most meaningful validation had come from an unexpected source. Last month, Zara had received a letter from a young woman at the Air Force Academy whose words captured the broader impact of her struggle. Major Nakamura, I'm a senior cadet studying aeronautical engineering. When I told my advisor I wanted to be a test pilot, she didn't question whether I belonged there. She asked how I planned to follow your example. I wanted you to know that because of what you did, girls like me don't have to fight the same battles you fought. But perhaps the most satisfying moment had come 6 months earlier, when she'd received an unexpected visitor at Edwards. Chief Master Sergeant Murphy had driven from Malmstrom specifically to see her, carrying news that captured how completely Thunder Squadron had been transformed. Major, Murphy had said, sitting in her office with obvious pride, the squadron isn't the same since you left, but it's better. The new commander, Colonel Sarah Davidson, runs things based on merit and performance, no tolerance for discrimination, clear assignment criteria, and she specifically seeks out diverse perspectives during mission planning. Murphy had paused, choosing his words carefully.
The young pilots coming in now, they don't even question whether female pilots belong in the squadron. It's just normal to them. That's your legacy, ma'am. Zara often thought about that legacy as she developed curriculum for the next generation of test pilots. Her courses were renowned for their technical rigor, but she'd also incorporated lessons about leadership under pressure, maintaining professionalism in hostile environments, and the importance of moral courage when facing institutional resistance. Her students came from diverse backgrounds, men and women, different ethnics and economic circumstances, but they shared common traits: exceptional ability and determination to excel despite obstacles. In many ways, they reminded herself during those difficult years at Thunder Squadron, fighting for recognition in a system that seemed designed to prevent their success. During a recent symposium on military leadership, a journalist asked Zara if she regretted the conflict at Thunder Squadron, given its personal cost and the damage to relationships with fellow officers. Her response was immediate and clear. "I regret that the conflict was necessary, but I don't regret fighting it. Every woman who serves after me will face fewer barriers because of that battle."
The question that had shaped her new role wasn't about regret, it was about responsibility. What obligation did she have to continue fighting for others who might not have her advantages? The answer had defined her approach to leadership at the test pilot school and her service on the Air Force Chief of Staff's Advisory Council on Diversity and Inclusion. Just last week, she'd mediated a case involving a Hispanic pilot who was being excluded from advanced training opportunities at another base. The situation was depressingly familiar, but the outcome was different. The complaint was taken seriously, investigated thoroughly, and resolved quickly. The pilot received his desired assignment, and his squadron commander received additional training on unconscious bias and inclusive leadership. This is what institutional change looks like, Zara had told her students during a recent ethics seminar. Not dramatic transformation overnight, but steady progress that makes each generation's service experience better than the last. As evening settled over Edwards Air Force Base, Zara reflected on her improbable journey from marginalized squadron member to nationally recognized leader in military aviation reform. The path had been neither easy nor certain, but it had led to exactly where she was meant to be. That weekend, she received a call that brought everything full circle. Lieutenant Sarah Murphy, the daughter of Chief Master Sergeant Murphy from Thunder Squadron, had been accepted to the Air Force Test Pilot School and would begin training the following year. "Major Nakamura, my father told me I should call you. He said you changed everything for women in military aviation and that I should thank you for opening doors that used to be closed." Zara smiled, remembering her own struggles and the people who had supported her during the darkest moments. "Lieutenant Murphy, your father was one of the people who helped me find the courage to keep fighting. I'm honored to know you'll be continuing that tradition of excellence. Ma'am, I want to be a test pilot, and I want to be as good as you. Lieutenant, you don't need to be as good as me. You need to be better than me. That's how progress works." After ending the call, Zara walked onto her office balcony and looked up at the clear California sky. Somewhere up there, pilots were pushing the boundaries of what was possible in aviation, testing aircraft that would define the future of military flight. Some of them were women who would never face the barriers she'd encountered, never have to choose between speaking up and staying silent, never have to prove their worth twice for every recognition. They would fly because they were capable, advance because they excelled, and lead because they were ready. And they would do it all in an Air Force that had been forced to examine its conscience and emerge stronger for the scrutiny. Zara had started as one woman fighting an unfair system. She'd ended as the catalyst for institutional change that would benefit thousands. The girl who had learned to swallow her pride with morning coffee had become the woman who taught others that excellence was worth fighting for. In her final log entry that evening, she wrote, "They said I'd panic in the cockpit and prove that women didn't belong. Instead, I landed a damaged B-2 on a highway
and proved that competence speaks louder than prejudice. The difference was, I never stopped believing in my own capabilities, even when everyone else doubted them. The story ended where it began, with a pilot who knew her worth, trusted her training, and refused to let anyone else define her limits. But this time, she wasn't flying alone. She was leading a formation of those who would follow, and the sky was wide enough for all of them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.